Hi everybody, welcome back to Paleo Cooking Live, the Thursday edition. I had a scheduling conflict yesterday, so you know me, here I am, I'm not going to miss a week. We're going to talk about tuna today. This ordinary little can is going to give us a lot of fun choices. In every other culture, especially in Europe, tuna is used in everything. So we're going to do some things that sort of vary away from the typical tuna salad. And we're going to start with tuna casserole. I know, everybody makes a tuna casserole, but this one's going to be a little different. Let's go to the stove and I'll show you. I'm starting off with a hot skillet, and I'm going to saute some vegetables because I really like, of course, as you know, lots of vegetables. And instead of noodles, we're going to use spaghetti squash. This is a really easy way to prepare spaghetti squash. Now, you know, the best way to do it is in the oven till you get those nice crispy edges, but I did this in the microwave in 12 minutes. I simply cut the squash in half. I used this casserole dish, flipped them upside down, not the long ways, like through the middle, so they both fit. I did scoop the seeds out first. Couple tablespoons of water and cover it with plastic wrap. And 12 minutes later, the spaghetti squash is done. And the great thing is, since it's going back in the oven again, we don't have to worry about missing out on those crispy edges because they're gonna happen when the casserole bakes. So this skillet's getting hot, and I'm gonna add, of course, my Casandrinos olive oil, a couple of tablespoons. And I have prepared some carrots, onion, celery, and a little bit of mushrooms. So we'll start with the onion. It's about a cup of onion. Carrots, onion, and celery are the holy trinity. These are what's called the aromatics in the culinary world. And the aromatic vegetables are what give you the aromas, the flavors. And typically what I like to do is a cup of onion, a cup of carrot, and a half cup of celery. So however you decide you want to proportion that, it's always 1 to 1 to a half. I'm going to grab a spatula.
Messina's on. She says hi.
Hi, Messina. I'm doing Tuna. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to let this start to sizzle. You can hear it. It sounds great. And there's nothing like the smell of onions cooking. And then I'm going to add the carrots. And I love to do multicolored carrots. I've got some white and orange. I like the purple ones. They all have delicious flavors. And they're just fun. They give a little color to your dish. And I think carrots are the unsung hero of the vegetable world. I'm doing a lot with carrots these days. They're delicious. They're sweet on their own. Sweet vegetables are just so good for you, and they help cut your sugar cravings. So eat some carrots. Bugs Bunny did. I'm also going to add the celery now and the mushrooms. I just have the mushrooms diced up like all the other vegetables. And these don't even have to cook all the way through. You just want them to get fragrant and lose the crunch a little bit so they're more al dente, and then they'll finish in the oven with the spaghetti squash when it bakes. This is a completely Whole30 recipe. I am going to do one little twist that takes it out of compliance, but if you're Whole30, you can leave it out, and I'll show you what that is at the end. So these are getting nice. I'm just going to let those mushrooms release their water. We've talked about cooking mushrooms before. You want the mushrooms to release their liquid because mushrooms are about 90% water. And if you don't let that happen, then they have a really kind of spongy, yucky texture. They just have a firmer, nicer texture if you just let that happen. And it's already happening. Can you show the pan? That's not the oil, that's the liquid from the mushrooms. See all that moisture there? So now what I'm going to do is add coconut milk. But what I did with this coconut milk was I left it in the refrigerator overnight and I drained out the water. So it's nice and thick. It's coconut cream basically now. And it's solid. But it's gonna melt out when we put it in the pan because we'll warm it up.
So what's the advantage to doing it that way versus just using it right out of the can?
I think that it just yields a nice thicker texture, and you release all that liquid that separates from the solid, so it's not as loose of a sauce. You have a thicker, richer sauce, and since we're not using dairy, we're using coconut milk, we want to have as rich a flavor as possible. And again, this is no dairy, no gluten, because we're not using noodles. It's 100% vegetables. And that's just going to stir in and start to reduce. I still have the heat on high. It's going to start bubbling, and you can see all those pieces are breaking down. You just kind of push them around. And it's very, very simple. Once that starts to bubble a little bit, I'm going to add some tapioca starch. And what I've done here is just mix 2 tablespoons of tapioca starch with a little water. Since I did it in advance, it's settled out a little bit, so I'm just gonna stir it back together with my little whisk. And the tapioca starch will help this thicken and help this sauce cling to the spaghetti squash when it's baking in the oven. And this, since the sauce is hot and the noodles, the spaghetti squash is hot from just coming out of the microwave, it's only gonna need enough bake time to help everything come together, help those flavors come together, help this sauce stick to the spaghetti squash, and just enough time in the oven to start bubbling, and it's done. I'm just gonna add that tapioca starch, and that's all in there. Stir that around. You can see it starts to get thick right away. And I'll turn the heat down to a simmer.
So I know we've talked about tapioca starch before, but remind me, what exactly is tapioca starch?
Tapioca is a root, so it's completely vegetable, and the root is dried and pulverized, and that's how you get tapioca starch, or it's also called tapioca flour. It's the same thing, just some people say starch, some people say flour. So now I'm going to add 3 cans of tuna, and this tuna, I love this brand. It's from Wild Planet. They put the top of the can on the bottom, so it's upside down. But it's literally nothing but tuna. It's not packed in water. It's not packed in oil. It's just solid tuna. The liquid is naturally occurring from the canning process. So that's the actual juice from the tuna. I'm just going to add that and flake it up a little bit with this fork, and then I have the rest of it here in a bowl. So this is 3 cans total, and I just want to make sure that that tuna is coated.
Hey Mom, Papu is on.
Hi Dad. Papu is Greek for grandfather. Hi Dad. I'm glad you could join us today.
Getting lots of likes from him.
Awesome.
Oh,
So this is done. That's it. The last thing I'm going to do is add nutritional yeast. Nutritional yeast grows on molasses trees. It tastes like cheese. It has a nice nutty flavor. So we're going to get a little bit of that cheese flavor without using any dairy. That's about a 1/4 cup. And I love nutritional yeast on everything. And I especially love when I can blend it in. Look at the nutrients that are packed in this dish. It's all vegetables, it's tapioca flour, it's nutritional yeast that tastes like cheese, but we have no dairy and we have no gluten. And now we're just gonna pour this over the spaghetti squash. We want it to be really yummy.
So just to clarify, nutritional yeast is not the same that you would buy for making bread.
No, nutritional yeast is actually dead from processing. Bread yeast or brewer's yeast is something that would be alive, so that when you do your bread baking or brewing or whatever you're doing, the live yeast is what creates the culture and gives you that nice lift and creates the carbon dioxide and all that other fun scientific stuff. So I just stirred in the spaghetti squash with the sauce that I just made. Just like to make sure that it's all mixed in really well. And it can go in the oven just like this. This is done. What I like to do when I'm not Whole30 is add these crackers. These are just some pulverized cracker crumbs, but they're grain-free crackers. This brand, Simple Mills, makes this amazing cracker. I serve it all the time to people that don't know the difference. It's delicious. It's made with almond flour. It's not Whole30 compliant. The casserole comes out delicious just like this. But if you're not Whole30, you still want to do paleo, and you want to add a little crunch, just crumble these on top. It's going to bake and get nice and toasty. But again, those noodles are going to get toasty on their own. And then after those are spread out pretty evenly, I just like to take a little bit of ghee. Ghee, of course, is clarified butter, and just sort of dollop it around so it blends in. And this is going to go in the oven for about 20 minutes.
About how much ghee are you using?
Oh,
Tablespoon?
you know, whatever looks right.
Sound like my grandmother.
I just like to kind of give it a few little dollops on the top so it'll bake in. This is going to go in the oven. And we'll set the timer for 20 minutes and we'll check on it in a little bit while we're busy doing something else. The other thing I wanted to show you while we're still over here on the stove is some fried capers. Let me grab those capers. We're going to do a fun dish. Oh, I guess I already have them here. I'm more efficient than I thought. That's going to have some fried capers. I love capers. I love the briny flavor that capers give you. These are going to splatter. I'm just using the back of the spoon because the spoon doesn't fit into the jar. Now, I didn't drain them first. You probably could, but I'm not too worried about that. I just want them to get a nice little bit of crispy coating on the outside. And again, I'm frying these in the Casandrinos olive oil. I love this olive oil. It's my absolute favorite go-to olive oil these days. I met Tony Casandrinos online, and he's a buddy now. They harvest from their family farm 4 times a year. It's always fresh. It's not sold in stores. Look at the expiration dates on the olive oil you buy in the stores, and you might never buy it again. Give this a try. I promise you'll never go back. So these are just getting nice and crispy now. Sometimes if you get big enough capers, they'll open up because capers are a bud. So when you fry them, sometimes they open up like a flower. I don't see any of these doing that today, but that's okay. Oh, there, that one did. It's kind of hard to tell the way I scooped it up. Anyway, it just gives them another dimension and a great flavor with the olive oil. Let's go over to the counter and we'll work on our next item. Just gonna grab a little hot plate. Wash my hands. You know, I wash my hands 1,000 times a day. And I love my beauty counter soap.
It smells good too.
It smells good. It's the citrus mimosa scent. My hands don't dry out from it. It's my favorite soap on the stove. Ooh, these guys.
Can you show which one it is, Mom?
Oh,
that
sure.
you bought?
This is the hand wash, and there's also the hand cream. And I'll use the hand cream at the end of the day.
Very cool.
Yep, I'm a big beauty counter fan. Everybody knows. So the next thing I want to show you is a toast that's Niçoise style. And we're going to do the toast on sweet potato slices. So I just took these sweet potato slices out of the air fryer. I sliced a large, this is a sweet potato, I know.
What?
Large little sweet potato. I left the skin on, I washed it, and I just made some nice slices about 1/4 of an inch thick. Brushed them with olive oil on both sides, and put them in the air fryer. You can do it in a toaster oven, you can do it in a regular oven, whatever you have. And I'm just gonna set up 2 of these right here because this is just so quick and easy, you don't even need a recipe. And you can use whatever you have on hand. So here's what I'm gonna do. I have some tuna. This tuna is packed in olive oil. I'm just gonna take some of that tuna and flake it and put it right on top. Niçoise salad is one of my absolute favorite salads. So why not make Niçoise toast? These are packable. You can take them with you to lunch or on a picnic if you're going out these days. They're packed with protein, healthy fats, and healthy carbs. So what's wrong with that? So there's the tuna. And I also have a hard-boiled egg. And I'm just gonna slice this. And we've talked about cooking hard-boiled eggs before. My favorite thing is an 8-minute egg. Bring it to a full boil. When it's completely boiling, turn the heat off, cover it, set the timer for 8 minutes. When they're done, just rinse them under cold water. They come out with that perfect yellow, no gray around the edges. And we're just gonna nestle those wedges right into that. And my other favorite thing about Niçoise is tomatoes. I've got some nice sliced grape tomatoes here. Just gonna stick those in there. You can put anything you like on these. Some Kalamata olives that I just sliced in half. It's against Greek tradition to buy pitted Kalamata olives, but I do it anyway. Save yourself some time. Enjoy the food, not the cooking. The cooking's fun too. And I have some fresh herbs that I just picked from my yard. Here's some basil, some thyme, and some dill. Classic Provençal flavors. Since Niçoise is a French dish,
Can you talk about how
with
you're
those flavors?
taking off those leaves on that too?
So thyme has such tiny little leaves. The easiest way to do it is, since they're growing in this up direction, I'm just gonna pull the opposite direction and they slide right off. That's it.
Okay,
you don't
cool.
even have to chop them. And then I've got some basil. I'm gonna show you a quick trick called chiffonade. Chiffonade is just a fancy word that French culinarians came up with. It means sliced very thin. And the easiest way to do basil leaves is to stack them up. These are tiny because my basil is just starting to come back. Roll it up as best you can, and then just go through it with a knife in little skinny slices. Just like that. Take the stem off, and when you unroll them, you have chiffonade, which looks like confetti on your dish. So we're gonna put a little bit of that basil, some of that thyme, and finally, dill and tuna. To me, dill and pretty much any kind of fish are just a classic combination. So I'm just gonna go through this dill slightly with my knife. Make sure you use a sharp knife when you're cutting herbs, because a dull knife will bruise it and the oils will come out and it kind of ruins the flavor. They don't taste as fresh. How easy is that?
It looks amazing.
Who says you can't eat healthy? Now I'm gonna take a few of those fried capers and put those on top. Ooh, they're still a little hot. And what a fun way to serve it, right? I just broke out one of my cutting boards. And the last, but certainly not least, my Casandrinos berry balsamic. I just mixed it with a little bit of my garlic olive oil. If you've tuned in the past, you know that I roast whole heads of garlic in the olive oil with a little rosemary, and then I just drain out the garlic cloves and I have garlic infused oil. I mixed some of the balsamic in with it. And they always like to settle, so you have to mix it back together real quick. And just a barely little bit of drizzle on top. And that's gonna soak into that potato. You could do small versions of this, cut the potato crosswise in this direction instead of lengthwise, and use it for appetizers. You can make a few in advance and just pull them out and eat them cold for lunch. It's really so simple. One of my favorite no recipe recipes.
Awesome. So Messina actually said she's out in Italy and it's dinner time right now, but they look amazing. She does have trouble sometimes finding sweet potatoes in particular. Do you have any suggestions for other items that aren't a bread?
You could certainly use any kind of potato. You could use a russet potato. You could use a Yukon potato. It doesn't always have to be a sweet potato. The thing I like about the sweet potatoes, especially the white sweet potatoes, is they just are packed with nutrients. But I always recommend doing a potato rather than bread. But, you know, you're in Italy and you're probably getting really good bread, and I'm really jealous.
And she has amazing basil, too.
And she has amazing basil. Messina, why did you leave me? Oh, it's so fun to hear from you. Okay, I just have one more thing to show you today. I'll get all this out of the way, and we'll get started on something that you're going to think is really weird, but trust me when I tell you, it's amazing. It's Tuna eggs. Anyone who likes hard-boiled eggs, of course, I'm a big fan, is probably going to like deviled eggs. So this is based on an Italian recipe where the Italians would use the tuna pureed into the spaghetti sauce. So what I'm doing is I'm pureeing it into the egg yolks and the other ingredients for deviled eggs. And it's also kind of going to have a little bit of a salmon or fish mousse type technique, which is really classic culinary, but we're cleaning it up a little with the ingredients. Let me grab everything. So what I have here so far is some egg yolks with about a quarter can of tuna and 3 hard-boiled eggs cut in half. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute too, so I have a fun story. I'm going to use my stick blender, and we're going to blend these up. I always go hardest to softest. So the most dense ingredient to the most liquid ingredient. That's going to smooth out these really dense egg yolks and tuna and bring them together. And also when we start adding the liquid ingredients and the other ingredients that aren't quite as dense, you don't get lumps. If you started with the loose stuff and tried to add this in, you'd never smooth it out. So I'm just going to set this guy on 2 and start pureeing. And you can see that's already starting to come together. That looks good. We're going to put this in a pastry bag, so we want to make sure that the tuna is well blended. And if you do a larger recipe, on the website the recipe is double. I'm just doing a smaller recipe for demonstration. You'll see that it's a little easier to mix. So now I'm just going to add 1 anchovy. I love the fishy, briny flavors that we're getting from all of these ingredients. And these oily fish are so good. They're packed with omega acids. And when you mix them up with all these other ingredients, it's not like anchovies and tuna. It's like the best thing you've ever eaten. I'm just gonna make sure that these are all blending in. They look really good. It's very pasty and thick. You can see that. Now I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. I actually like lemon. I don't like to get too crazy with it, but I've already squeezed this fresh lemon. We'll start with 1. tablespoons of mayonnaise. Now, since it's double on the recipe on the website, it's going to be a 1/4 cup.
And this is the avocado mayonnaise?
This is always going to be an avocado oil mayonnaise or something that I make from a healthy fat from scratch. But since you can buy avocado oil mayonnaise these days in almost every store, why not just buy it? But mayonnaise is so easy to make. If you ever wanted to try it, I highly recommend giving it a shot. So now the mayonnaise went in. I'm going to turn it up. This is looking really good. And this is another fun way to show your friends some good paleo and Whole30 recipes without them being like, oh my gosh, what the heck is that? Fish mousses, especially things like salmon mousse, are just so old school, but they have a lot of heavy cream and they're not exactly the healthiest. But this is a great way to incorporate that technique with something kind of new and different. I'm just gonna get the rest of this mixed in. Now there's a little bit of tuna stuck in the blade, but that happens. The rest of it's nice and smooth. Just gonna stir that together. And I have a pastry bag. I'm a pastry chef, so I use pastry bags. I highly recommend going on Amazon and ordering a box of pastry bags. You might pay $12 for like 100 bags, maybe less. You can do it with a Ziploc bag. I've never had much luck with that, but I prefer doing it this way in the first place. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. First of all, you see how I'm folding it down. These are really big. You can buy smaller ones too. If you fold it down, it gives it some stability. You can put your hand underneath that cup that I just made, and then you can fill it. I already cut the tip off. I made it about a 3/4 inch cut. I'm just going to fold that up and hold it with my finger so I can fill the bag. And again, if you have a Ziploc bag, you can try that. I'm just used to my tools. And I'm just going to put it into the bag and wipe the spatula sides on the side of the bag. And keeping that cuff in place helps when you fold it back up. Get all of this out of here. Yes, I'm messy, I know. I'm cleaning up afterwards too. So now let me tell you about how I cut these eggs. When my daughter, who's filming today, was a little girl, how old were you, maybe 3?
Maybe.
She had knife skills. I let her loose with the knife. She loved deviled eggs. So we were making deviled eggs one day and I said, peel the eggs and cut them in half. So I gave her a little knife about this size. And when I came back to the table to see what she was doing, she had cut them in half through the middle instead of lengthwise, which is what most people typically do. But look how brilliant this is. You have a nice even shape of egg white all the way around. One end is naturally flat from the cooking process. So then you just take the other end off a tiny little bit so it sits flat, and everybody has a nice even portion of egg. So we've kind of done deviled eggs like that ever since. So now I have everything in the bag. I'm pulling up the cup and I'm just going to squeeze it down to the tip. And I'm going to fill these just by squeezing. I stop squeezing and I push. And that cuts it off. And this last guy fell apart. Don't give up on him. Let's see if we can get him to hold together. Just gonna use that mousse to stick him back together. That works.
Something tells me that'll be mine.
Something tells me You're gonna eat a few of these. And now I'm just gonna take some of these fried capers that we already prepared and put them right on top. Now, I know when I first said tuna deviled eggs, you probably all rolled your eyes and said, what is she talking about? What is she thinking? But this doesn't look too bad, right? It's got that delicious oily fish, which is so good for you, the protein from the egg, the healthy fat from the avocado oil mayonnaise, and this nice briny finish. Now, you are gonna have to eat that one. And you can do these in advance and put them in the refrigerator, and they're gonna be delicious. Let's put a little bit of dill on these guys. Just a little sprig to make them beautiful. And I think look at that, 48 seconds left on our tuna casserole. So let me get that out so we can see how that looks. It was delicious.
Mm-hmm. I was doubting you. I don't know. I shouldn't have.
Don't ever. Don't doubt your mama. You already know this. All right.
This smells good.
It's bubbly. And the sauce has gotten nice and thick and buttery from that ghee. Let's bring it over here so we can have everything together. Now I recommend letting this cool a little bit before you cut into it because it will be still very liquidy and you just want to be able to cut through it and have that sauce thicken up. I don't want to touch it. Almost touched it.
It's hot. Don't touch it.
It's hot. So here's 3 completely different ways to do tuna. You have the tuna niçoise on potato toast, tuna casserole, which is a pretty traditional dish except for the spaghetti squash and the coconut milk, and of course the tono eggs. You know where to find me on livingdelishnutrish.com. I am going to skip out next week. I've got a couple other things going on in my life, so sorry to miss you next week, but I'll be back the week after that with some new and fun Whole30 and Paleo recipes. And be sure to sign up for my newsletter at livingdelishnutrish.com. Thanks for joining me. Bye, Dad. I love you.